always enjoy this particular conference. It's always so practical and informative, and I take things home from here that I've never thought about before, even though I've been an SGRT user for a long, long time. And that will kind of be the focus of the talk today, is that, if I can make sure my clicker's working, give me one moment. Yeah, that will kind of be the focus of the talk today, is how much I have been impressed over the course of the last 10 or so years at the innovation and just the way SGRT has exploded to be useful in all of these encompassing areas throughout the entire treatment journey, rather than just being used as if it's phenomenal, right, in real-time patient monitoring during treatment. But so many more things that can be done and that improve quality and safety for our patients besides just using this for real-time monitoring during the actual patient setup and treatment process. So looking forward, use of surface guidance throughout the treatment journey. A couple of acknowledgments and disclosures. I have had in the past or currently have research agreements with both VisionRT and Varian Medical Systems. I have no personal stake in either one of these companies, nor do I benefit financially from them. And the last one is the most important, and that is a special thanks to all of the clinical and research colleagues that I've worked with in the past on projects having to do with quality and safety, and specifically dealing with SGRT. As Miranda mentioned a moment ago, I worked with the fantastic teams at Northside for many years, and a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today, even though I don't specifically mention what was done at which clinic and so on and so forth, a lot of it was accomplished at Northside, in addition to some of the fantastic colleagues that I have across the HCA system currently. So thank you to all of the people that I stand on your shoulders, figuratively, not literally, which is good for you. Our clinical experience. Let me give you a little historical background into where we started. I'm going to use this as kind of an analogy to make it broader for the rest of the talk. But roughly 2013, we acquired and commissioned our first SGRT system, and that was for a couple of different reasons. We needed a more accurate and more reliable means of monitoring deep inspiration breath hold for our breast service line. And not only did we realize that there were several inconsistencies and disadvantages to the system that we were using at the time, which was not a service guidance system, but patients were actually, even at that time, in like 2012, 2013, 2014, they were doing their own research, and they were asking their physicians, what about this? We're reading about how this can make my treatment safer, more accurate. And so the need was both clinical and from the research that was being done actually by our patients. At the same time, we desperately needed a real-time monitoring system with sub-millimeter accuracy for our LINAC-based, frameless, stereotactic service line. And we had one physician in particular who was really, really a driving, motivating factor in trying to get something without a frame on a LINAC to serve our patients. And surface guidance was one of the things that was available at the time for us to explore. I will admit, and I'm going to come back to this in a moment, that staff reception to this new technology covered a spectrum of attitudes. And when I say that, it does not tell you quite how powerfully and how diverse this spectrum happened to be, but they covered a spectrum of attitudes from hopeful skepticism to outright distrust in the accuracy and or the efficiency of SGRT. But we almost universally viewed SGRT as potentially useful. However, at the time, we kind of collectively agreed this was potentially useful, but it was really only for special procedures. From 2014 to 2019, then, in our clinical atmosphere, we experienced a rapidly increasing use of SGRT and evolving workflows that incorporated SGRT. Again, there was a relatively short break-in period in which we had a lot of things we had to solve. Some of them were questions and attitudes from individual clinical staff members. Other were training, commissioning, were all the physicists trained in exactly what they were supposed to do, writing out policies and procedures and so on and so forth. That break-in period is real. It's not to be taken lightly. And it's really something that exists with incorporation of any new technology, but we definitely experienced it when we were trying to start using and broadening the use of our SGRT system. There has to be jokes. If it's a talk from me, there's got to be at least a few of them. You are under no obligation to laugh. I told one of my colleagues that probably 10% of these will get a chuckle at all. But if you think about your staff members that have a little bit of that attitude that they don't really want to incorporate new technology into your clinical workflows, I thought about this change my mind meme. Can you read the text that I inserted here? So some of the staff members, really had this attitude. SGRT is just too slow. It's just too inefficient. We're never going to use this beyond, maybe some select special procedures if we even widely end up using it for that. And I get it. I can relate to being in a state of mind or in an attitude that it's difficult to incorporate change. There were some other cinematic and literary figures that experienced the same kind of problems. For example, Lord Vader. The Empire did nothing wrong. Or perhaps if you, like me, are a Tolkien fanatic, our good friend Boromir. Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you do find yourself in the existential quandary where you too are kind of stuck in the way that you're thinking and you're not having a very easy time incorporating stuff that data says is better, you might find yourself in the ranks of people like Darth Vader, okay? And what I like about those analogies, though, besides the fact they make all the nerdiness in my heart glow, but these were characters that eventually they saw the light and changed. Of course, for both of them, it was too late. So change your mind before it's too late. Maybe that's what I'm really trying to say here. And that's the conclusion of the talk. No, I'm just kidding. So a relatively short break-in period in which many questions were asked and resolved, in which we really proved the accuracy and efficiency of our SGRT system across a very large spectrum of treatment techniques, to the point that we started our, quote, every patient, every fraction approach, first with stereotactic treatments, such that all stereotactic treatments would be monitored with real-time surface monitoring. And then we began to research how we could use this for all of our breast patients, and specifically in such a way that they would no longer need markers. So neither tattoos nor any other type of triangulating skin mark, but we would actually just set them up with surface guidance. That was relatively new at the time. It's not new at all now, right? So that was work that we submitted and presented at ASTRO in 2018. And when you start thinking about it, if you've already branched out to using surface guidance in those ways for every patient, every fraction, now you really start thinking about, even though maybe nobody else is doing it this way yet, or maybe the training courses we had didn't talk about using surface guidance in this way, our brain starts thinking, well, maybe we can innovatively use this really to benefit the treatments of every patient, every fraction. This is supposed to be a joke. Not a single one of you even smiled. I was watching you while I put it up on the screen. This is the way that we often learn, right? That we often receive education. I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who do exactly what I say, right? But trying to step kind of outside the box, of learning a system in that way. We started to try to incorporate this more and more, to the point that we transitioned our first clinic, a single enact clinic, to fully markerless treatments for all patients within that year. It just happened to be the clinic that our good friend Miranda Murray was working at the time and was instrumental in that project. Okay, so here we go. So that was our, past and somewhat present, experience with SGRT. And you can see how we started off in a very limited scope, which was okay for the time, but as many users like you started innovating and using this technology to serve more and more patients for the quality and safety of their treatments, the way that, a drop of water onto a still pond or pool begins to ripple outward and infiltrate more. I'm sorry about always hitting the mic. I do much better if you speak quietly into the lapel. In that same ripple effect way, I want us to think about the way that that impacts not just a single clinic and your individual workflows for patient treatment, but really now in 2023, how SGRT has ripple affected to the point of encompassing the entirety of the treatment journey. So we'll use that analogy to kind of think about how SGRT is now impacting treatment simulation, treatment planning, treatment setup, treatment delivery. Ripple effect of SGRT in treatment simulation. So some I obviously cannot mention every single type of solution that's commercially or on a research basis available out there. As we go through the talks, you need to realize that not every single system has all of the capabilities that I'll be talking about. You need to do your own research, especially if you already have systems installed in your department, exactly what they're capable of and how the technology is different. But some examples of SGRT in use in treatment simulation are, of course, the CRAD Sentinel 4D-CT system and the VisionRT SimRT with real-time coach system that are both pictured on this slide. During treatment simulation, of course, the use of SGRT begins with patient identification, setup, and positioning. I want to say a little bit more about patient identification later, but I think for right now, for the purposes of this moment, suffice to say that this is not something that should be ignored, as if it's too elementary to need some other check system than what we're currently doing, which is basically a verbal timeout, right? That's the universal method of patient identification. And I think that we should not ignore the fact that it can still be quite problematic. And that's all I want to say about it right now. 2023 Hospital National Patient Safety Goals. This has been for like 5 years now or something like that. Still, the number one area of concern is identifying patients correctly, even in 2023. Here's a picture. I believe this is from, I know this one is from the Variant Identify system in CT simulation, in which you can see that they're running a check on patient ID, immobilization devices, and I can't read it from here actually. I guess it's settings. I actually chose this not because the picture is that illuminating, to tell you the truth. I chose it because I noticed this little Easter egg in the top right, that the patient's name in this picture is Selena Kyle, the not so mild-mannered alter ego of Catwoman. Thank you. You get 10 points for Gryffindor. Well done, well done. Okay. So while monitoring the actual patient's body, right? We're not talking about a jig or a surrogate or a band or an apparatus that involves tubes and other things. We're talking about actually three-dimensional real-time monitoring of the patient's body. We have checks of immobilization devices and their positioning and settings, real-time tracking of patients' movement, acquisition of 4D CT in a bin phase retrospective approach so that a 4D CT can be reconstructed, actual real prospective acquisition of gated images so that the imaging itself is actually triggered based upon the phase or the amplitude in which the patient is breathing or moving, and monitoring of static breath positions, so like deep inspiration, breath hold, or end expiration, breath hold. Again, I need to point out that not every SGRT solution has all of these capabilities. We're trying to just, hold on, wait for it. Maybe I can't go back. That's very philosophical, isn't it? There's really never any going back. Thanks for that. So, but we're really talking about, how SGRT is impacting, the entire treatment simulation process. Treatment planning, this is relatively new to me. And again, I'll point out that almost everything that I'm introducing to you during this presentation is actually going to be talked about in much more detail by smarter people later on in this conference, okay? But the impact of SGRT in the actual treatment planning process, for example, the Vision RT MAP RT system that will be talked about relatively shortly today. And with this system, during the planning process itself, a surface map of the patient's external contour is combined with a model of the LINAC gantry and couch geometry, and it includes whatever aspects of the immobilization device that can be captured in the surface guidance capture, such that a clearance map can be produced to actually illuminate, while the patient is there in sim or whatever, what couch and gantry angle combinations may be problematic because of collisions. And so this can be important in at least a couple of different ways. And again, I don't pretend that my description of this is comprehensive, but at least it can be useful in avoiding plans which might include collisions based on real quantitative data, not, well, oh, there might be a collision, which is what we often end up having to battle, right? When we're either planning or checking the plan, wondering whether or not there's going to be a collision problem. But with real three-dimensional quantitative data, trying to avoid those collisions. But also, I think we can all relate to this last point too, of actually having to tweak a plan and choose angles that perhaps we don't think are optimal in terms of the dosimetric distribution, but we back off on the angles we're using because we're afraid there might be a collision and there's no real way for us to know. And so really looking at the quality of the treatment plan here, right? Are we able to stop shying away from angles that we might avoid because we fear collisions, when actually those angles aren't a problem at all? You see? Patient identification and treatment. Examples. Here we have a picture borrowed from Varian of the Varian Identify system, and on the right I chose a picture of the Vision RT Align RT system in bore, right, for your Halcyon and Ethos solutions, for example. And this is the stuff that I'm going to put like 6 bullet points up here, but these are the ones that you probably know and are familiar with the most, but I'll put them there and then have some conclusions here. So patient identification, as we were talking about a moment ago, that potentially includes check-in, LINAC queue, patient selection, and potentially a machine interlock if the patient has not been identified accurately. Real-time surface mapping and monitoring for patient setup. So that is, as therapists have been telling us for years now, that it's faster, more efficient, more consistent, even across different users, to set up a patient using surface guidance rather than skin markers like we did for years and years and years. Identification and verification of immobilization devices and their settings to make sure that treatment setup and immobilization is correct. Real-time monitoring of static position, breath hold, so there again, like deep inspiration, breath hold. LINAC interfaced gating by phase or amplitude, and real-time visualization of surface dose deposition via Cherenkov imaging. I said that so deadpan. Can you even believe that? I know there's going to be at least one talk on Cherenkov today, right? Can someone, or this conference? Blows my mind. I cannot wait to hear that talk. As a matter of fact, I should just stop talking now and let that talk proceed, but I won't, of course, because it can't shut me up is the problem, right? But the fact that for decades we've known that there are very, very small signals from Cherenkov light indicating surface dose deposition, but it just hasn't been used. It hasn't been utilized. And now we're able to actually look forward to the time when we can use Cherenkov radiation to monitor actual clinically significant changes in dose distribution due to patient movement or whatever. I won't go on. I know there's going to be a great talk about it, but just one more thing that's blowing my mind about how SGRT is impacting patient treatment quality and safety. And all of that, of course, I'm trying to go back, sorry. There we go. All of that, of course, keeping in mind that we're reaping the benefits here of real-time, non-ionizing monitoring of the patient's surface, set up without skin markers, set up using video to make those complicated setups more fast and efficient, improving patient satisfaction, improving patient safety. I can't stop talking about the benefits of this technology and how you phenomenal minds are implementing it to impact your patients for the better. You know, there were two studies at least that retrospectively looked at incident learning systems and mistakes that were made or incidents that were reported in patient treatments. So for example, like the Saffron system, right, that has like 2,000 incident learning reports over 10 years or something like that. One of those studies published in 2021 by Hanya Al-Halak and her group, you should read this. It should be required reading, I think, for anyone who uses surface guidance. But retrospectively looked at some 1,500 incident reports and then tried to gauge, based upon those incident reports, how surface guidance could have kept them from happening. Fascinating idea, right? And it's published. It's there in Radiotherapy and Oncology for you to read. But in those reports, you know, we're finding data like out of, say, 1,500 incidents over the course of 5 years, 20 to 30% of them could have been completely avoided by the implementation of SGRT. And since those studies are a little bit dated, right, I have to think, I don't want to use the word assume because I think that this hypothesis is much stronger than that. But with the implementation of this vast spectrum of SGRT across the course of the entire treatment journey, that even more potential incidents can be prospectively halted by the incorporation of SGRT into all these areas of patient care. And when I emphasize the word prospective, I mean that we're really using this to catch mistakes before you hit the beam on button, right? Rather than those, word I can't say moments where you realize that the mistake has already been made, whether or not it was caught. And you know, the number of events that are reported is always a tiny subsample of the number of events that actually happen. So when we say that 20 or 30% of treatment setup or actual treatment misadministrations could have been avoided, looking at the reports over the last 5 years, it's probably a lot more events than that we're seeing that SGRT can stop those mistakes before they happen. And so that's why, and if you've ever heard me talk about surface guidance before in a conference like this, or if you were an unfortunate person to run into me out in the foyer and we get to talking about it and you can't get away, even though you're giving me the social cues that the conversation is over and yet I keep talking, the reason that I get into the subject like that is because we're still at a time, even in 2023, when we are trying to convince some of our colleagues, some of our administrators, so on and so forth, how vastly improved, how potentially vastly improved the quality and safety of our patients is. That's not mine, that belongs to someone else. By the implement, you ruined my punchline here. I'm right in the middle of my finale. I'm ready for my close-up. Just kidding. I love you guys. But how vastly improved the quality and safety experience of our patients can be with the implementation of SGRT. We have reached the point that we should no longer have to convince people of that because the data is just too strong. And that's, of course, why you have fantastic clinics like some of the colleagues I work with, like some of you who have realized this, and this is being implemented for every patient and every fraction, and just look how it's still going. Every patient, every fraction during treatment was just the beginning, and look how it's still going. So in the same way that SGRT has impacted individual clinics in the way that I describe my experience, with this ripple effect of starting with treatments but embracing more and more as we realized how much how very much it was helping our workflows. The point is really to show that SGRT is having the same impact across the entirety of the treatment journey. And that, my friends, is your introduction to this conference. Thank you so much for listening.